Now that I'm older, I realize we're just forms of social control. School sports exist to train us to be nationalistic. The basic idea is that you support your team simply because you live within certain man-made borders, and you're meant to hate every other team for no other reason other than the fact that they live outside your man-made borders. Sound familiar? They're training us to be xenophobic. It trains us to be obedient workers. Do your homework, turn it in on time, raise your hand, ask to go to the bathroom, be quiet. In order to succeed, you have to obey authority. And dudes like Gary Vee will say that the answer to this is starting your own business. But these guys just want to be at the top of the unjust system, when we should be trying to end it. Ever notice how you are always in classes with generally the same kids? Most schools have what's called a tracking system, which basically separates us into different social classes. You have your AP/honor students, your regular students, and your lower level students. These three classes funnel into the UC system, the CSU system, and the community college system, at least in California. The whole argument behind this system is that you give students an education that suits their abilities, which seems pretty reasonable at first until you realize that the lower the track, the lower the quality of education. So students don't have the chance to improve, which then funnels out to higher positions of power in society and low wage labor. And because there isn't much intermingling between the tracks, the high track students could end up stigmatizing and discriminating against the low track students. So if you have this system that funnels high income students to high income jobs and low income students to low income jobs, all you're doing is strengthening social and economic inequality for generations.
So this TikToker by the name of Mike E points out the fact that the American education system doesn't really seem to be oriented much towards education. Now the reality is this is pretty intentional. The American education system was designed at a time when working at a factory was the expectation for most American workers. So as a result, the school system in the US was largely designed to make sure that children could grow up to be functional at factories. That's why things like turning in assignments on time is weighted so heavily compared to actually knowing and understanding the material. That's why there's so much emphasis put on memorizing facts and figures as opposed to conceptually understanding the topic at hand. In essence, the school system was designed to do two basic things, which was get people to the point where they can read and write, and then after that, to get people to the point where they can readily follow instructions from employers. Which you could say, oh, but that's a normal thing. That's what we want. We want people to be able to grow up and get jobs. But you have to understand that there is an ideological assumption built into that, which is to say that workers should just be workers, should not be running the workplace, and should work under the direction of an employer. It very much is training people to be in the authoritarian environment of the workplace. Because the reality is, workplaces in the United States are in essence tiny dictatorships that get to run their own little segment of the economy. And our school system is essentially built to reinforce that norm. Another thing this TikToker pointed out that's really important to understand is the tiering of students within our education system. This is something that's fundamentally proven to not improve education. It actually makes education worse, because what ends up happening is the people who get put in a higher tier, they tend to just rest on their laurels. They think that because they have established themselves as smart people, they have made being smart part of their identity, and thus will put less effort into actually working hard to learn new things. And if they find that they're bad at something, will typically just avoid it altogether instead of engaging with it. And then of course you have the people who are put in the slower tracks, and they're basically denied any opportunity to grow. They're in a sense held back by low expectations. Because the reality is, people, especially children who are learning in a school environment, very often respond to the expectations that are put on them. So if you have a system that is putting low expectations on them, that is saying, no, you're probably not going to succeed. You're probably not going to be able to learn this thing. You're probably not a very smart person. Then those children will very often accept those expectations for themselves and also won't work very hard to learn or grow as people. The reality is that this whole track system fundamentally hinders people's ability to learn because it makes the presumption that being smart or not smart is some sort of innate characteristic. Because the reality is, in order to truly learn things and to become what people would call smart, you have to put a lot of work into it. You're not magically going to be amazing or good at something. And sometimes something might take you a little bit more time to learn than it might take for others, but the ultimate reality is that it is not an innate characteristic that is immutable. Your intelligence very much is contingent on the environment that you are in and how much work you can put into what you're learning, and how much opportunity you have to even put that work in the first place. But our education system is basically built around stripping out that opportunity and stripping out any idea that people can fundamentally work to grow as people or to become more intelligent or knowledgeable. But when we normalize this type of ranking, this idea of some people being smart and other people being not smart, it really creates this social division and cultural reinforcement of ideas that are in essence eugenicists. Because another thing that's important to understand about what was popular when the United States education system was being designed was also eugenics. Then, of course, there's the racism that exists within school districts. That is to say, a lot of white families go out of their way to make sure that their white children are not spending too much time with black children in class. And that just boils down to just absolute racism. And then when you include the disparities that already exist in terms of wealth, you can see how that leads to a ton of pressure from racist parents to put in place these fast track programs for their students while other students get actively held behind.